Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to call the meeting of the Audit Committee to order. Michelle, are there any public speakers?
Yes, we have one public speaker today, Charlton D'Souza. I would like to remind the speaker to please limit your remarks to 2 minutes and be aware of the clock in front of the room. You will see a warning light when you have 30 seconds to wrap up your remarks.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Charlton D'Souza. I'm the president of Passengers United, and I'm very happy to speak at the Audit Committee. One of the things that I'm really concerned about is the Bowery Residents Committee, the BRC, that you guys provide millions of dollars for. Do you guys do an audit of them? Because I know the state comptroller did a audit report and found deficiencies in them. And the reason why I say that is because my outreach team were at Penn Station, and a lot of times, according to the police officers that we've spoken with, NYPD and MTPD are telling us that a lot of times they don't see the BRC workers, and the homeless are telling us that they're giving them business cards to call someone. And I know I ride the subways. We don't see anything happening with the BRC. The situation's out of control. So we definitely need an audit of what they do. How many caseworkers do they have in the subway system each night? And if there's more caseworkers needed, then that needs to be looked at. And also, I wanted to talk about the subway car cleaners who are cleaning the subway cars, the contract cleaners that New York City Transit outsourced to. I think they're doing an excellent job, and I think that the MTA should hire them permanently and give them a decent living wage, give them union benefits, because these people risk their lives for us during the pandemic, and they've actually, helped fill a shortfall of MTA, New York City Transit union cleaners. So I think that those who are citizens should be given some sort of, extension, and should be given an opportunity to take the civil service test so they can become permanent cleaners, and in terms of other stuff, I think that that's something we'll have a communication with you privately, and we'll DM you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Have a
Charlton.
good one.
Thank you. This concludes the public speakers.
The minutes for the prior Joint Audit Committee Board meeting in May were approved at the Joint Board Committee meeting in June. Therefore, no vote is required. Michelle, are there any changes to the work plan?
Yes, we have one change to the July Audit Committee meeting. The single audit report from our external auditors has been moved to the October Audit Committee meeting. The Office of Management and Budget issued a 6-month extension to the MTA for the 2020 single audit submission. Management is currently working with the external auditors to conclude this review.
Any questions? Okay, may I have a motion? Second? And a vote to accept this change to the work plan? Thank you. Next up is our independent accounting firm with 5 items that will require a vote. We will take all 5 votes at the conclusion of their presentations. First, we will have Jill Strohmeyer, the Managing Director, who will present the results of the review of the first quarter 2021 MTA Consolidated Interim Financial Statements. The financial statements will be issued in final form after the Audit Committee review and approval. Jill?
Thank you, and good afternoon. Deloitte is currently in the process of completing our review of the quarterly financial statements for the MTA for the 3-month period ended March 31, 2021. A review of the interim financial information consists primarily of analytical procedures and making inquiries of management responsible for financial and accounting matters. A review is substantially less in scope than an audit, the objective of which is the expression of an opinion regarding the financial information. Based on our reviews at this time, we are not aware of any material modifications that should be made to the first quarter financial statements for them to be in accordance with accounting principles generally accepted in the United States of America, or GAAP. And that concludes my prepared remarks on the Q1 review. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Jill. Are there any questions on the first quarter financial statements? Okay. Next, we have Naomi Lopez, MTA Deputy Comptroller, to provide management's review of the 2020 employee benefit financial statements, including a discussion on management's analysis and the required supplementary information to the financial statements. Naomi?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Okay, let's see. I'm sorry, I can't really see from my angle. Sorry about that. Today, in the little awkward here. This presentation is on page 140 of the committee book. Today, in your committee book, you have 6 benefit plan financial statements. There are 4 defined benefit plans: the MTA DB plan, the MAPSTOA pension plan, the Long Island Railroad additional plan, Metro North cash balance plan. We also have the deferred compensation program, which consists of the 401 and the 457 plans. Lastly, we also have the MTA retiree welfare benefits plan, or known as the OPEB plan. Shown here on this slide is the listing of the total net assets of these plans, with the DB plan being the first, with the biggest amount of net assets of $4.8 billion, and approximately 32,000 of membership. So we have a listing of all the benefit plans for your perusal, and you can see that that's what the slide shows. The MTA benefit plans are prepared in accordance with GAAP accounting, as required by GASB, and it's composed of the MD&A, the basic financial statements, the notes to the financial statements, and required supplementary information. This slide is an overview of all the MTA pension plans. Basically, you'll have the 4 single employer plans that I just mentioned, plus 2 multi-employer plans, NICELRs and NICERs. NICELRs is primarily MTA headquarters employees, and the MTA has about a very small percentage of the membership there, about 0.35%. The NICERs plan is primarily the New York City Transit and TBTA, thank you, TBTA, Bridges and Tunnels. And we have approximately 24.4% of membership in that plan. As you can see, the total pension for the combination of the 6 plans comes to about $35.5 billion. The plan net assets come to about 26.9, giving us a net pension liability of about $8.8 billion. That's the liability that we'll record on the consolidated financial statements as a liability. And you could also see that from this whole 6 plans, the MTA is about 75.5% funded in terms of what the pension plan assets are. Right below it, you'll see the OPEB plan. We're at 24.5 of an OPEB billion rather of OPEB liability, very minuscule net assets of 130,000, leaving us with a big OPEB liability of 24.4 billion. This is just an overview of how the pension plans are doing in the overall United States of America. The majority of the funding ratios, in this particular case for the pension plans, are pretty much not too bad. I mean, you have primarily the MTA hitting around 75%, New York State about 94%. So we're doing pretty okay, and you're not bad. But when you go to the OPEB state plans, a lot of the states are really not well funded in that respect. They're pretty much about 44 of the states are under 32%, and a majority of them are at 0% funding. And that's basically because they're at pay-as-you-go. That's why they pretty much have very limited funding from that perspective. And then this last slide just shows you a little bit more detailed by state exactly what their funding ratio is. And you'll see that I inserted MTA there at the very near the end of 0%. That's the end of my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Noemi. Any questions,
Can I just
Bob?
ask one question? I see on your listing that the Long Island Railroad additional plan is really the one that is out of the ordinary in terms of the percentage funded ratio. Is there anything you can tell us about that? Is that because all the others are in the 70s, but that one specifically is only 56%?
I think over the years, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a closed pension plan, and a number of years ago when I got here, I think we were down in the 26% funding. We took excess revenues, general reserve funds that we didn't use, or windfalls that came in, and we have been adding funds to that. I think we got up to about almost 70%. Like 66%, and now it's just a matter of investment returns versus the contribution. But it is a closed plan, no new members are being added, and we have in the past used excess funds when available to reduce our long-term liability. And so while it is below the benchmarks for others, it's significantly higher than it was 10 years ago. And I think that was the board made the decision that when we did have, you can either call it a windfall or we didn't need to use our general reserve, we were going to do it to address long-term liabilities such as avoiding debt by doing pay-as-you-go, using it for a pension contribution, or for a while we were putting it into the OPEB reserve. So.
Okay, and to continue the discussion on the pension plans, Jill will discuss the results of the audit of the various pension plans that Noemi just spoke about. Jill?
Thank you. Deloitte is in the process of completing the audits of the 2020 MTA employee benefit plans. We are performing our audits in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards. We are not aware of any significant changes in previously adopted accounting policies or their application for the year ended December 31, 2020, except that open-ended mutual funds are disclosed in the footnotes to the financial statements as being measured using a readily determinable fair value. In prior year, open-ended mutual funds were disclosed as being measured at net asset value. This change was made to align with accounting literature described in GASB statement number 72. We are not aware of any significant changes in accounting estimates or management's judgments relating to such estimates. There were no uncorrected misstatements or disclosure items passed identified during our audits. Other than the change in disclosure related to mutual funds that I just mentioned, there are no material misstatements that were brought to the attention of management as a result of our audit. We have not had any disagreements with management during our audits, and we received the full cooperation of management and staff throughout the course of our audits. I will provide a final results letter to this committee upon issuing our reports. That concludes my prepared remarks. I'd be happy to answer any questions related to the audits.
Are there any questions? Next, Jill will provide a review of MTA's compliance with the guidelines governing investment practices. Jill?
Thank you. During our 2020 audit of the MTA, Deloitte performed sample testing of the MTA investments within the portfolio. The testing included a sample testing of both purchases and sales made throughout 2020. And in connection with our 2020 audit, nothing came to our attention that caused us to believe that the MTA failed to comply with MTA investment guidelines, New York State investment guidelines, or specified section of the New York State Public Authorities law. So everything that we saw during our testing of investments in the 2020 audits aligned with investment policies and public authorities law. And that's essentially what the report that you have in front of you details. And that concludes the presentation on the investment compliance report. Happy to answer any questions related to this report.
Are there any questions? Jill will now provide a brief statement on the management letter reports and answer any questions you may have. Jill?
All right. We have provided to you with our management letter comments related to the 2020 audits of the MTA. Just want to remind everyone that there are 3 levels of severity as it relates to internal control deficiencies. The first being a material weakness, which is the most severe, significant deficiency, and then a deficiency being the least severe. All of the comments within this letter that you have in front of you are of the lowest level severity, which is just a low level deficiency. All of the comments within this letter relate to information technology or IT matters across several different technology systems. And these comments really relate to four main areas. The first being password length, complexity, expiration and reset of parameters or lockout thresholds, and being in accordance with MTA IT policy. The second relates to the removal of accounts for transferred or terminated employees. The third relates to periodic review and recertification of accounts and access to ensure appropriateness of such access to certain technology systems. And the last relates to segregations of duty overlap with the creation and approval of system changes. I do want to note that all of the IT matters that are noted in this letter were mitigated by other controls or other factors. And then want to also just point out one additional item. In the May 2021 joint board and committee meeting, I did communicate to that board and the committee here that we had one control matter of a significant deficiency severity, which related to the TBTA's 2019 restatement of cash balances between restricted and unrestricted classifications. We did not put that in this letter here again, since it was in the letter we shared with you back in May. And with that, that concludes my prepared remarks related to the management letter comment for 2020. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Jill on the management letter reports? Okay, for the final item from Deloitte, Jill will brief the committee on the results of the review of the MTA Inspector General 2020 Office Operations and Expenses based upon agreed upon audit procedures. Jill?
Thank you. Deloitte has been engaged to perform agreed upon procedures as prescribed to us by the MTA and the MTA IG's office related to budget accountability for the year ended December 31, 2020. I'll remind the committee that agreed upon procedures are less in scope than an audit or a review. We have completed the required 14 procedures. The procedures consisted primarily of comparing employee and payroll information to HR forms and documentation and payroll registers, reviewing disbursements and petty cash vouchers for approvals and supporting documentation, and then finally comparing IG expense information to the MTA's books and records and budget information. We have no significant exceptions to report to this committee as a result of our procedures. And I'd be happy to answer any questions related to the IG engagement.
Thank you, Jill. Noemi, any questions? Okay, I need a vote to accept the 5 reports: the first quarter 2021 consolidated financial statements, the pension audits, the investment compliance report, the management letter reports, and the review of the MTA Inspector General's office. Do I have a motion to accept all 5 reports?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
The reports are accepted. Next, we have Lamont Kirst, the MTA Chief Compliance Officer, who will brief the committee on selected aspects of the Enterprise Risk Management Program, Ethics and Compliance Program, and Financial Interest Reports. Lamont will also give a brief update on the implementation status of prior audit recommendations. Lamont?
Okay, so that does sound like a lot, but I promise I will be brief. The presentations are in your book, so I will be jumping a few slides, but if you have any questions on anything that's in the book, I'll be more than happy to answer them. Yeah, that's okay. So the first thing I wanted to bring to the committee's attention that we are continuing deploying new technologies in the area of ethics, risk, and compliance. We are implementing the new Archer GRC system, which combines policy management, ethics and compliance management, risk management, all in one integrated solution that hopefully will provide us with better data that we can then act upon moving forward. So this is actually the first report I'm giving to this committee with data that's being driven through the new system, so I'll keep my fingers crossed. So In 2020, we loaded the first set of business processes with their associated risks and controls into Archer. We loaded over 700 vulnerability assessments, and they were conducted through Archer in an automated fashion. In addition, we conducted 1,194 control self-assessments, all utilizing an automated system in Archer to provide not only tracking of the assessments, but to ensure that there was adequate documentation supporting the assessments that were being done by management. I'm going to now jump to the ethics and compliance report, if there are no questions on the enterprise risk management side. And maybe I'm not. All right, so while they're loading that up, let me just kind of move forward. We are now tracking all ethics and compliance issues within the Archer platform. So we are now breaking it down by various categories. So for last year, the leading categories that my office handled were financial disclosures, conflicts of interest, policy waivers. As it relates to the top category, which was financial disclosures, as you can imagine, the majority of those dealt with employees who failed to file on time. Last year, there were about 240 employees who did not file on time. As of today, every single one of those issues have been resolved. The important thing to note is that we have over 7,000 filers on any given point in time. And unlike, I think, most of you who think of filing as being an activity that happens once a year, because we have employees who are being promoted, who are coming on board, it is a constant process. So while I say we have 7,000 filers, we actually have more people in any given year. So it's actually not that large of a number, especially when you think of the people. Most of them were new employees who had never had to file before, who get this email from Ethel saying you have to file a financial disclosure. And what do you do when you get an email from somebody named Ethel? Delete. And then you get a call from the compliance department saying, why did you delete that? And they're usually very good about going in and getting it done quickly. The important thing to note about the ethics program is that through transformation, we're going to be consolidating a lot of the activities that are now happening at the agencies to provide a consistent approach, consistent determinations and judgments across the board. The other thing that we've done is that we've had issues, as you know, with outside activities. So we have now created a new automated system called the MTA's Outside Activity Management System, where we've gotten rid of a good percentage, not all, but a good percentage of the paper forms. And we are now tracking and approving outside activities in a system that gives us, again, transparency into the system. We processed over 300 outside activity requests in the system last year, and we hope to continue to do more in the years to come. Finally, I'm going to talk about the audit tracking report. One of the things this board has asked us to do is to keep an eye on audit recommendations that are aging, for lack of a better word, anything 6 months past the original implementation date. As of today, we have 150 that we are now tracking that are past the implementation date. Now, I would like to qualify that by saying when we instituted Archer, we took the kind of the old-fashioned approach, trust but verify. So anything that we couldn't verify had been implemented, went into Archer as being opened. Now, of course, timing is everything in life. We rolled this out, we put all this data in there saying, well, we don't have proof that you implemented this. You now have to prove it to us so we can close it. Well, of course, what happens? Everyone's home because of the pandemic. All the paper records are here at headquarters or in the agencies. So a lot of them couldn't verify it. We are working through that process now. But I think the most important thing is now we have a system and a process working with Michelle and her team that not only can we track them, but we're requiring a double verification. My office reviews the documentation. We require proof. It goes to Michelle, and Michelle has an eagle eye. She reviews it as well, so that when we come to you and say things have been implemented, both Michelle and I have confidence that they've been done, that's in fact has happened. So those are my reports for today. I'm available to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Lamont. Any questions? Yeah, Robert.
On the compliance with the audit recommendations, or the Inspector General's recommendations, how long do you leave something open for before it's just, they didn't comply, or they left it open, right? It's not forever.
Okay, so right now, what we're tracking is the ones from audit services. We've been working with Michelle and her team. We'll be loading in the audits from the Inspector General probably within the next month or so. So the next report you get from me will include those. But we don't write things off. I mean, if it's there, it's there. Now, if something changes and, they go back to audit and says, for example, situations change, we no longer can implement this recommendation, it still has to get closed out in the system with a justification of why we're not doing it. I mean, the system, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on the way you look at it, requires that there's a paper trail. So once that audit gets issued, we have to do something with it.
Is there a timeline by which there is an expected implementation date for certain recommendations?
Well, this board has told us to come to them within 6 months after implementation date to let you know that what's passed due, and that's what we're doing. And I'll be honest with you. I mean, we use it as a bit of a hammer, and we let the departments and the agency know that this is coming and you need to get it done.
So I'll qualify that for just a bit. Our audit recommendations have always had implementation dates, and so we've always reported to you if it's 6 months past due. The IG's office did not have implementation dates in the past, and so that's something that Carolyn's instituted now that's new for them, and they do have implementation dates. And so those, to this point, really aren't past due for 6 months for the things that have come out within the past year or so. But that information will go into GRC as well, and so we'll be reporting to you anything past due for the IG's office as well.
And by creating those dates, it provides an additional accountability for us, to be honest with you, so.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Next, we have Michelle Woods, the Auditor General, to provide a briefing of the work completed as compared to the audits planned for the year. Michelle?
Thank you. I would like to update the committee on the status of the 2021 annual audit plan. Year-to-date, we've completed 48 operational assurance audits, including onboard and pension QA support projects. We've identified 77 findings and made recommendations, which Lamont tracks in his system to improve transparency, governance, and internal controls while reducing risk. These audits identified potential cost savings and efficiency opportunities of $39.9 million. We also performed 129 audits related to capital projects. This work includes a review of cost proposals as well as interim and closeout audits to ensure contract billings are in accordance with the contract terms. When requested, we assisted management in the review of claims to ensure increases were justified and third-party question costs. Right now, the question costs are $6.8 million for the year on the capital side. Some of the audit highlights for 2021, we performed COVID cleaning audits at the railroads, New York City Transit, and MTA bus. We identified some areas for improvement related to tracking the actual cars and buses cleaned. We also identified opportunities to improve efficiency at MTA bus related to in-service cleaning and hand cleaning versus electrostatic sprayers. The potential savings for the year is estimated at $25 million in this area. In our prior audit of medical benefits, we found that dependents had not been removed from medical plans as required when employees divorced. We recommended management performed a dependent eligibility verification audit, which is a DEVA, immediately. During the verification process, members voluntarily dropped ineligible dependents with estimated annual savings of $10.7 million. Management is in the process of completing the final notifications before additional dependents will be removed, for which no supporting documentation was provided by the employees. The project team has estimated potential cost for these dependents to be about $78 million. Not all of them will be removed because supporting documentation will come through this last push. But we recommend that the DEVAs be performed more frequently going forward, at least every 3 years. We also continue to review timekeeping and overtime across the agencies. Full integration of the Kronos clocks has been completed, but it's not fully integrated due to reliance on legacy systems for scheduling and pick. This continues to require a manual process for entry of overtime for rampant traffic delays. At MTA bus, our audit identified an estimated $4.2 million in unsupported overtime costs because of these manual processes. Pension support of the pension plans that we just discussed, Long Island Railroad, Metro North, MTA Bus, and MTA Police. We have a special QA group who reviews the pension calculations and ensures that they're accurate. We've identified cost adjustments to the pension calculations this year that we extrapolate over the expected life of the employees. The cost adjustments were $977,000 for just this year, the employees retiring this year. And the third-party contract audits, we continue to perform the pre-award audits as well as interim claim reviews and our contract closeout audits. We have a Sandy audit unit that we put together with this committee's support to be responsive to the FTA's requirement for the money that we received for Superstorm Sandy. We've completed 138 projects and made 371 recommendations to date, with cost adjustments of $62 million. We meet with the MTA IG quarterly to discuss the Sandy audit work. They are co-chairs of that committee. And we provide a combined report to the FTA on the efforts of both the MTA OIG and MTA audit in this area. We've committed to the FTA that we follow up on all Sandy audit recommendations to ensure that they have been fully implemented, and we will continue to do so. During the first 2 quarters, we continued to provide independent insurance reviews to assist management in validating the commuter railroads, conductors, and ticket sellers are collecting and reporting the appropriate fares from passengers, as well as to ensure compliance with operating rules. At Metro North, based on the sampling plan, we conducted a total of 1,494 tests. During 1,223 observations from January through June, we reported 58 instances of $525 in fares were either not collected or the amount collected was incorrect. They're minor differences, but what it does is it identifies patterns, and we'll do additional observations to ensure that the collections are being performed as required. At Long Island Railroad, the numbers were similar. We conducted a total of 1,436 tests during 1,296 observations. Again, minor adjustment, 522 in fares were either not collected or the amount collected was incorrect. The exceptions noted have been reported directly to the agency for review and appropriate corrective action. The respective departments at the agencies have provided us with an update of actions taken to address, reinstruct typically the employees that were involved in these exceptions, and identified crews for further action. So this slide was in our presentation in January. It just gives a functional kind of look at the audits that are expected for the year. So it covers the 9 functional areas that we work with. I guess it's down to 8 now. I'm not sure what we dropped off. Service delivery, revenue, finance, human resources, safety, capital program, procurement, and technology. There were 97 audits on the original plan. The items with 1 check are in progress. Those with 2 checks have been completed. In some areas, such as station cleaning, we've performed multiple audits at different agencies because we would do that separately at Metro North, for example, and Long Island Railroad. We currently have 8 vacant positions. We've been working to fill those since January. We will not be completing all 97 audits because of the 8 vacancies. Typically, an auditor would complete 4 audits during the year, and that would be an operational auditor. The capital construction auditors, those audits are quicker, but those are not counted in our operational count. I have Darren Jurgens and Phyllis Richardson. I'd just like you to meet them. I know we have new members, so Darren and Phyllis. These are the 2 assistant auditor generals. Darren's primarily in charge of the capital side of the house, and Phyllis is on the operations side, and they would be happy to answer any questions you may have about any of the audits that we've done or that are in progress. So let me just finish and we'll... Looking ahead, I will work with the agency presidents and the tower leads to identify the audits to be prioritized during the remainder of the year, and to determine which audit should be postponed until 2020 due to the vacancies that I'm carrying. With respect to the external auditors, 2021 is the final year of our 7-year contract. We are working with procurement and have submitted a scope of work to begin the solicitation process for the next contract. That's for our financial audits. We continue to coordinate with the city and the state auditors. Darren actually leads that effort for our office. We assist them as they perform their audits, and Darren coordinates with the operating agencies to ensure compliance with New York State Bulletin LO 100 through all phases of the audit process, where we provide documentation to the Department of Budget through their online system. We're working with the Chief Compliance Officer to ensure agencies are implementing the audit recommendations, and we are migrating the tracking of the MTIG recommendations into the compliance system to improve the timeliness of reporting. We used to track all of the IG recommendations in a database within audit. They're now going to be tracked in the compliance database, and the best thing that's going to do, it's going to speed up our reporting. We're required by state law to report out quarterly on the implementation of the IG's recommendations, and the process was a very laborious manual process where we'd reach out to each agency with all the open recommendations and try to get information back, and by the time we would get information back, it would be the following quarter. So we would be reporting in January for the 3rd quarter of the prior year. This will allow us to report straight from Le Mans system. 2 weeks after the end of the close, we'll be able to issue a report that tells the status of the open recommendations. Finally, we will continue to work with the Inspector General's office on Sandy projects as well as other audit issues as they arise. We have also worked with MTA management over the past year to implement the Morrison and Forster recommendations and the IG recommendations related to overtime and timekeeping. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Michelle. Are there any questions? Hearing none, we move on to the last item on the agenda. Michael Garner, MTA Chief Diversity Officer, will present the status of the Department of Diversity and Civil Rights performance measures.
Great, thank you. And my summation is going to be brief also as well, as it is included in the book. We continue to work with all of the agencies in closing out their projects. So we've closed out 1,864 projects. Next one. This is a graph as to how it's going. Next one. We are also going out for site visits to make sure that the certified MWDBE firms who are working on our projects are working in their certification areas. And we also work with the IG's office to root out MWDB fraud. Last but not least, we were asked to monitor and track one of our largest projects, Third Track. We are currently at about 19.9% MWB inclusion. We are currently working with Jano and his staff on a monthly basis to ensure that the goals that are established and set on our capital construction projects are the goals that's going to be achieved. That's my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Any questions? Now we need a motion for the Audit Committee to adjourn. Second, please. Motion, second. Thank you. And a vote? This concludes the Audit Committee meeting. Thank you.